Psychology is the science of intellect, characters, and behaviors of all animals, including humans. Join us in the development of psychology through time.
It started with 1900s, with Sigmund Freud published the interpretation of dreams. According to him, our dreams have meant something with our unconscious mind.
1906. Classical conditioning. What is classical conditioning in psychology? According to classical conditioning theory, that state behaviors is learned by connecting a neutral stimulus with a positive one, just as when Pavlov's dog heard a bell that is a neutral and expecting a food that is a positive. The learned behavior is called conditioned response. Classical conditioning is a type of learning that happens unconsciously. Classical conditioning, also known as Pavlovian or respondent conditioning, this learning through association and was discovered by Pavlov's a Russian psychologist. This is Ivan Pavlov. Example of classical conditioning. After 5 years, 1911, operant conditioning refers to an instrumental conditioning. This is also a method of learning that employs a reward and a punishment for behavior. Operant conditioning is an association made between a behavior and consequences, whether negative or positive for that behavior. Operant conditioning example, letting them play a video games after they complete their homework. How did Skinner discover operant conditioning? By conducting experiments using animals which he placed in a Skinner box that are similar to Thorndike's puzzle box. This is Skinner. Example picture of operant conditioning. After 2 years, 1913, John B. Watson. Who is John B. Watson? John B. Watson was an American psychologist who popularized scientific theory of behaviorism, established as a psychological school. What did John B. Watson contribute to psychology? Was a pioneer psychologist who played an important role in developing behaviorism. Watson is also known for the Little Albert experiment. This is John B. Watson. This is what happened to Little Albert experiment.
The APA Committee on Nomenclature and Statistics developed a variant of ICD-6 that was published in 1952 as the first edition of DSM. DSM-5 contained a glossary of descriptions and diagnostic categories that was first official manual of mental disorders to focus on clinical use. The use of the term reaction throughout DSM reflected the influence of Adolf Meyer psychological view that mental disorder represents reactions of the personality to psychological, social, and biological factors.
In 1954, Abraham Maslow with his hierarchy of needs.
On the year 1960s, Albert Bandura came up with an experiment and formed it. During this time, many scholars didn't believe Bandura's idea, and they argued that learning was always a result of classical and operational conditioning. So, in this point, Bandura came up with an idea to prove that learning can also be learned by a mere observation, and this is the time where Bandura came up with the doll or the Bobo doll experiment. Bobo doll is a set of controversial studies that includes preschool children, adult actors, and also a punch-up doll. In the first set of experiments, the children were seated alone in a corner of the room. From there, they observed an adult actor aggressively kicking and scolding the Bobo doll for almost 10 minutes. Afterwards, the same child was put into a new playroom. Another adult deliberately frustrated the child by taking away the toys that the children played with. The frustrated child was put back into the room with the Bobo doll, and the team of Bandura made 3 observations upon the children. The children who initially saw the adult punching the doll was most likely to copy the behavior.
Boys are most likely to do so.
A man's behavior and girls' behavior when they often observe a certain scenario. For example, men most likely to copy the behavior of the actor, and females or girls are most likely to be more influenced by same-sex. Bandura concluded that children are most likely to copy other behaviors regardless of where they have seen the behavior.
DSM-3 was published in 1980. DSM-3 introduced a number of important innovations, including explicit diagnostic criteria and multi-partial diagnostic assessment system, and an approach that attempted to be neutral with respect to the cause of mental disorders. This effort was aided by extensive work of constructing and validating diagnostic criteria and developing psychiatric interviews for research and clinical use. This DSM-5 was published in 1994. It was the culmination of 6-year effort that involved more than 1,000 individuals and numerous professional organizations. Much of the effort involved conducting a comprehensive review of the literature to establish a firm, empirical basis for making modifications. Numerous changes were made to the classification. Example is the disorder were added, deleted, and recognized, to the diagnostic criteria sets, and to the descriptive text.
In the 20th century, we have Steven Pinker, a cognitive psychologist who published The Blank Slate or Tabula Rasa. The author makes a case against tabula rasa models in social sciences, arguing that human behavior is substantially shaped by evolutionary psychological adaptation.
Thanks to the contribution of the many experts along the way, the field of modern psychology has expanded into multiple subdivisions or specializations, some of the numerous branches of psychology as it stands today. The abnormal psychology, the psychopathology, and the abnormal behavior. Behavioral psychology, how behaviors are developed. Clinical psychology, the assessment and treatment of mental disorders. Cognitive psychology, how we think. Counseling psychology, the treating patients in mental distress. Cognitive psychology, how we think. Counseling psychology, the treatment of patients in mental distress. Developmental psychology, how people change throughout time. Experimental psychology, the research of the brain and behaviors. Forensic psychology, the psychology within legal settings. Health psychology, how psychology influences mental health and health in general. Social psychology, the psychology of children in educational settings. Social psychology, the social influences on psychology, and more.